Not too sweet. Don't let the milk spill. Strong, but never burnt. That's all he ever said. A minimalist command spoken without looking up, like a code passed between worlds. Chloe, behind the counter, gave a single nod, her fingers already moving toward the espresso handle, as if guided by instinct more than instruction. Ben, wiping his hands on his apron, threw a glance over his shoulder and muttered under his breath, "Grumpy old rich guy." His voice held that casual blend of humor and judgment, unique to those who serve but never really see. Then he slid into his usual spot at table 4. Always table 4. Gray coat zipped to the throat, hat drawn low, like a man hiding inside a fog. The macchiato sat silently in front of him, steam curling in slow spirals above its perfectly balanced foam. The receipt was tucked neatly beneath the saucer, untouched. His hands, folded with a quiet reverence, didn't move, but his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, scanned the room with surgical precision. Behind the counter, Ben chuckled at something on his phone. Chloe wiped the counter for the 3rd time in 2 minutes, and still, no one noticed how the man's gaze lingered on Ben, just as he dusted a little extra cocoa over a different drink. No one, except him. Each morning, as predictably as the sun that spilled across table 4, the bell above the cafe door gave a weary chime at exactly 7:30. He never had to speak his order. By the time the hem of his coat crossed the threshold, Chloe had already keyed in the macchiato. They called him Swiss Clock behind the bar. Ben had a page dedicated to him in his black notebook under the title, Most Complicated Regular. But Jackson, that's the name they never said to his face, never reacted to the whispers, never flinched. Maybe he didn't care. Or maybe he knew everything and simply chose not to play their game. He'd walk directly to table 4, where the light always fell just short of the table's edge, like even the sun respected his boundaries. Some mornings, he'd pause. His hand would drift over the chair back, fingers brushing wood like testing it for memory, not dust. Then, wordlessly, he would sit, and the macchiato would arrive. Neither early nor late, like clockwork. Always the same, foam like satin, weight just right, surface unbroken. No one dared to ask why he always came alone, or what he was waiting for. Because he never waited. He arrived like a man who already knew the outcome, like he'd lived the day before it happened. Until one morning, something shifted. Just as the door clicked shut behind him, a small folded piece of paper fell like a leaf, unnoticed by all but Na. She spotted it wedged under table 4, half trapped beneath the chair. Curious, she stooped, brushed off a coffee crumb, and unfolded it. 2 words, pressed so deeply into the paper it seemed the writer hadn't breathed while carving them. Jackson R. She stared at the name A, first name, and an initial, oddly familiar, yet suspended in mystery. She turned toward the window just in time to catch the tail of his coat disappearing around the corner. Her lips parted. Maybe to call out, maybe to ask, but she didn't. She only whispered to herself, probably nothing. The paper was still warm. She folded it again, this time slower, as though it held weight. She slipped it into her apron pocket, not discarded, not shared. Just held. Each day, without fail, before he lifted his cup, Jackson would tap his index and middle fingers twice against the table. 2 soft clicks, always 2, never 1, never 3. A sound barely audible, but sharp, like ritual, like ignition. Chloe thought it was nerves. Ben figured it was habit, but Louise, new to the cafe, offered a quieter theory. That's his ignition switch, he whispered once, like syncing a heartbeat to the brew. He watched it every morning. The way Jackson's fingers moved, deliberate, controlled, like a man syncing his breath with something deeper. But then there were the other mornings, the quiet ones, the tense ones, mornings when Jackson tapped twice, but didn't drink. When he just sat, watching, listening. He always said thank you. Always nodded, nothing more. He never lingered. Until one day, he did. That morning the macchiato was long gone, the cup sat empty, the foam clinging to porcelain like a memory. But Jackson didn't move. From the register, Trevor watched him. "That guy's too quiet," he'd once told Chloe. "The quiet ones always have something to hide." Chloe had only laughed. "He tips well, never complains, never sends anything back." Trevor's voice was low, nearly suspicious. "Exactly. Too perfect. Makes you wonder what he's really thinking." And now he sat, silent, still, hands folded, eyes anchored to something far beyond the window. 5 minutes passed, then 10. No phone, no distraction, just silence that grew heavier with each breath. Louise whispered, "Is he waiting for someone?" No one answered. Then Jackson blinked, slowly, like a man settling a decision he'd spent years avoiding. His fingers rested on a folded napkin, unmoving, but his gaze, sharp and surgical, locked on Louise, who was on his knees, scrubbing spilled coffee from the floor with a rag no bigger than his hand. 3 tables away, customers pretended not to see, heads buried in phones, conversations muted. Trevor stood over Louise, arms crossed like a warden. "You spill it, you clean it," he said coldly. "No one here is going to fix your mistakes." The words weren't loud, but they landed like bricks. Louise didn't look up, just nodded, silent, his cheeks burning with quiet humiliation. Jackson never looked away, his hand never lifted, his body never shifted, but his stillness changed. It thickened the air, made time slow, made silence scream. No one met Louise's eyes. Na turned toward the espresso machine, pretending to search for nothing. Chloe cleaned a spotless glass with hunched shoulders, shrinking inside herself. But Jackson, he kept watching, eyes unblinking, fixed on Louise as if he were engraving every second into memory. From behind the counter, Ben whispered, not daring to look up. And for the first time, the cafe wasn't just quiet. It was waiting. "Kid like that probably won't show up tomorrow." No one responded, maybe because they didn't agree, maybe because they didn't dare. Luis didn't lift his head. Whether he heard it or not didn't matter. He kept wiping, though his hands had slowed, the rag soaked and useless now. Still, Jackson remained where he was, not with sympathy, not in judgment, but in presence, anchored, like gravity in human form. In a room full of people pretending not to see, his silence from table 4 grew louder than any voice. Then the bell above the door chimed. Early. Too early. Chloe's gaze shot to the clock. 7:15. Her eyes narrowed. There he was. Jackson. Coat damp from the mist outside, face unreadable. He didn't pause, didn't survey the cafe. He walked straight to table 4, like a man returning to a familiar battlefield, and sat down with both hands resting on the tabletop. Deliberate, steady, as if waiting for something other than coffee. Ben, watching from the sink, leaned in. "He's never this early," he murmured, more to the air than to anyone else. Chloe said nothing. Her fingers unconsciously wiped her apron, a small tell of nerves. Luis emerged from the back, steps halting as his eyes caught Jackson already seated. The rhythm of the morning was broken, and no one believed it was accidental. Jackson stood, not rushed, not forced, and made his way to the counter. He didn't glance at the menu, didn't speak immediately, just waited until Na, who was wiping down the register, noticed him. Their eyes met. And then softly, yet cutting through the haze of routine, he asked, "Are you happy working here?" Na froze, cloth in midair. Her lips parted. Words stumbled out. I guess I'm used to it," she said, then softer. "No one's ever asked me that before." He didn't smile, didn't nod, just looked at her for a beat longer, like he was holding something invisible between them. And then, "Let it go." Ben, nearby stacking cups, slowed his pace, pretending not to listen, but everyone heard it. The question didn't accuse, it didn't pry, yet somehow it echoed through the space, unsettling the walls. Chloe watched from behind the bar, and though no one said it, everyone felt it. Something real had been said in a place built on pleasantries and silence. Jackson's gaze shifted to the back of the store, where Luis was restocking stir sticks. "Your knee," he said gently. "How's it doing?" Luis looked up, startled more by the memory than the words. "Better," he said, trying to laugh it off. "Just a bruise." But his voice cracked. Something raw had slipped through. Not quite shame, not quite gratitude, but something that hadn't been seen in a while. Jackson nodded once. Simple, but it landed heavy. Across the cafe, Trevor leaned against the office doorway, watching, always watching. His eyes narrowed, calculating. Luis noticed. His hands trembled slightly as he returned to work, smile fading like breath on glass. Jackson said nothing more, just returned to his table, moving with the same quiet precision, the same impossible calm. But Luis, watching from behind the counter, understood something for the first time. This man wasn't here just for coffee. He was watching, he was listening. Trevor emerged fully now and called, voice soft but cutting. "Nah, can I see you for a moment?" The cafe didn't pause, but it felt like it did. Nah followed him to the office. The door didn't close all the way. Inside, he pulled a printed form from the drawer, slid it across the desk. "Incident report. Disruption during customer service. You laughed too loud this morning." Nah stared at the paper. One sentence. No space to explain. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Trevor tapped the desk with his pen. "Just a formality. We log everything." Her hand shook as she signed. When she came back out, no one asked. No one had to. She moved behind the counter, tucked the pen behind her ear, and kept wiping. But something colder had settled into the air. Above the counter, a laminated sign curled at the edges. Bold letters read, "The customer is always right. You are always tired." Next to it, a leak from the ceiling plinked down every few minutes, darkening a tile in slow motion. A security camera buzzed, its motor stuck in a loop, lens aimed nowhere useful. A hum of broken systems pretending they still worked. Jackson noticed. He noticed everything. His eyes moved slowly, tracing the dissonance. Vent to sign, camera to clock. Nothing broken enough to fix, but everything misaligned. And he didn't write it down, didn't say a word. He simply sat, coffee cooling before him, bearing witness. Every buzz, every drip, every silence was trying to say something, and Jackson, still as a mountain in morning light, was the only one listening. Ben leaned closer to Chloe near the register. His voice was barely breath. "You remember Jada? Asked for one day off last month." Chloe nodded, not looking up. Trevor moved her to North Point, 2 buses away, no warning. Chloe's hands slowed, pressing lids into the dispenser too carefully. "I'm next," she whispered. "He moved my shifts to late close. It's been 2 weeks. No one talks to me when I clock in. No hello, no shift notes, nothing." Ben didn't answer. He didn't need to. That silence, the kind that grows behind your back, never to your face, had settled like fog across the cafe. And Jackson from table 4, though he couldn't hear the words, could see the weight in their bodies. He saw the exhaustion in the slow movements, in the forced smiles. And sometimes, silence spoke louder than all the laminated signs in the break room. An older man stepped to the counter, coat damp, voice low, respectful. "Just a cup of water, please. No ice." Chloe looked at the sink, then back at him. Her hand moved toward a cup, hesitated. Trevor appeared. No raised voice, no sharp tone, just firm and rehearsed. "We're not in the business of free habits," he said, voice quiet but cruel. "We sell coffee, not kindness." Chloe froze, cup still in her hand. And behind her, Jackson didn't blink. He just watched. The older man blinked, his eyes flicking to the floor as if apologizing for needing anything. He gave a small, respectful nod and stepped back without a word. No resistance, no complaint. just a quiet exit. Ben tracked him as the door eased shut behind him. Nah didn't look up, but Jackson did. His eyes followed the man with a kind of weight that wasn't pity and wasn't outrage. It was recognition. Some rules, he knew, weren't printed. They were carved into the air by what you were denied, not by what you were allowed. And that rule had just been enforced, not whispered, but declared. Jackson lingered at the counter a moment longer than usual. His gaze shifted upward to the neat blackboard above the bar, where the phrase hung beneath the drink menu like an outdated promise. Macchiato. Simple, strong, honest. 3 words, clean, balanced, centered like a creed, like something someone once believed in. He stared at it, unmoving. The corner of his mouth pulled, not into a smile or a frown, just a pressure, like something was pressing back against him from inside. Then, without a word, he turned and returned to table 4. The light had changed while he stood. It cut sharper across the wood now, more angular, more fragile. His chair still held the ghost of his earlier warmth. He sat again, both palms flat on the table. He didn't reach for the cup. He didn't tap. He just listened. Outside, a delivery truck rolled past. Inside, the cafe slumped into its usual mid-morning lull, but this time, the quiet felt brittle, as if the cafe itself had grown tired of pretending. Chloe stacked used cups, exhaling through her nose, and muttered to no one in particular. Honestly, macchiato's not even that good. Nah, drying her hands, looked over. There was a moment of silence, then the tiniest smile. Maybe people still believe it's real. Chloe blinked. Real? Nah shrugged, tossing her towel. Simple, a little bitter, not too dressed up, feels honest, like it's not trying too hard. She reached for a clean rag, but her words floated above the steam and the hiss of the milk frother, hanging longer than they should have. Kinda like how we used to work here. Nobody laughed. In the silence, Jackson stirred his coffee once. He didn't sip it. And still, no one spoke again for a full minute. But real, honest, not trying too hard. Those words lingered. They clung to the ceiling, to the menu board, to the bones of the building. Then, 2 soft knocks from Trevor on the office door. Chloe, a minute? She wiped her palms and walked over. Inside, Trevor stood behind the desk, arms folded like steel bars. No greeting, just a demand disguised as inquiry. That old guy from yesterday, why didn't you report that he left without paying? Chloe's face didn't flinch. He didn't. Left 20 on the table. Trevor paused, just long enough for the silence to feel like a punishment. Next time, let me know directly, he said. No anger in his tone, just a careful, controlled edge. But his stare said everything else. Chloe nodded once, then turned and left. As she re-entered the cafe, the familiar layers of sound folded over her. The hiss of steamed milk, the hum of lo-fi beats, the buzz of empty conversation. But something in her walk had changed. She moved slower, not heavy but quieter. Ben looked up as she passed. Said nothing. From table 4, Jackson followed her with his eyes, and though no one said it aloud, the space behind her still felt colder than the freezer. That evening, Na stayed behind after close. She moved quietly between the lockers, restocking napkins, sweeping corners. The cafe had emptied. Lights dimmed into a softer version of themselves, closing mode. She opened her locker, expecting the usual emptiness. But there it was. A single folded slip of paper pressed carefully against the back wall. Clean, precise. She unfolded it slowly. Don't talk too much, just do enough. No name, no date. The handwriting was sharp, too sharp, the kind that tries to seem casual but presses too hard on the pen. A warning disguised as advice. Na stared at it, breath held. Not from fear, from something colder. A confirmation she hadn't needed, but couldn't ignore. She looked down the hallway. Trevor's office door was closed. She folded the paper again, placed it back exactly where it had been. Not because she believed it, but because she understood. This wasn't about words. This was about surveillance. This was the real message. We're watching. Stay small. Outside, the rain had started again. Software relentless. Inside, not a single word broke the air. The next morning, the door opened at 7:32. No bell this time, just the sound of leather soles on cold tile. Jackson entered. No coat, no gloves, no scarf. Just a crisp, pressed shirt. Collar sharp, sleeves buttoned. He didn't look at the counter, didn't check the register, didn't order. Chloe looked up, startled by the break in ritual. Ben paused, cup suspended in midair. Luis froze near the fridge. "Morning, sir," Luis said. The first time he'd spoken to Jackson before being spoken to, Jackson met his gaze. No smile, no nod. Just a calm look that carried more than all the words Luis had heard. Yum, that week. Then came the smallest gesture, a nod. Jackson moved to table 4. Saturday, hands folded, eyes forward. But the silence, this time, wasn't empty. It was waiting. Moments later, Jackson stood. Calm, measured. He didn't reach for his coffee, didn't brush his sleeves. He walked with a quiet certainty toward the back counter where Trevor stood hunched over the morning checklist. "Can we speak in private?" Jackson's voice was clear, steady, not polite, not cold, just final. Trevor turned. "About what?" "Your leadership," Jackson replied, "and how you've been using your authority." Trevor's brow furrowed, just briefly. Then came the performance, the soft nod, the empty smile, the gesture down the hallway. "Of course, right this way." Jackson followed. Not as the quiet man, not as the regular, not as the one with the exact macchiato formula, but as something else now, as the voice that had waited long enough. Ben watched. Nah shifted. Chloe's hands paused in mid-wipe. No one spoke, but every pair of eyes followed Jackson as he stepped into the back. The door closed behind him with a soft click, quiet but final. Inside the office, Trevor took the far side of the desk, sat with his arms stiff, jaw tight. "Please," he said, gesturing. "Take a seat." Jackson didn't. He placed one hand gently on the edge of the desk. His fingers barely touched the wood, but the tension in his body was unmistakable. His gaze steady, unmoving. "I'm not here for the coffee," he said. The words weren't loud, but they cracked the silence in half. Trevor's lips parted, searching for a line, but nothing came. "I'm here for something far less pretty," Jackson continued. "Something you probably stopped noticing a long time ago." Trevor blinked, but still didn't speak. Outside, the cafe continued. Foam, music, conversation. But in this room, only breath, wood, and the thin hum of a man who no longer intended to be quiet. Jackson reached for his scarf, unwrapped it slowly, folded it once, then the coat, one button at a time. Deliberate, exact. The moment hadn't ended. It had just begun. Jackson laid his coat across the back of the chair he hadn't used. With a quiet precision that seemed ritualistic, he reached into the inside pocket and removed a small metal badge. Brushed silver, solid, real. Its presence was deliberate, the kind of object that didn't need to announce itself. He placed it on the desk between them. Not as threat, not as performance, just truth. "Jackson Rivera, I found her." The words were few, but they landed like thunder underwater. Felt more than heard. Trevor's eyes dropped first. Then his jaw softened, not slack, but enough to expose the slip, the fracture in his practiced mask. His gaze jerked back up, searching Jackson's face for some clue. A lie, a joke, a mistake. But Jackson gave him nothing. No movement, no emotion, just presence. The badge glinted under the narrow shaft of morning light bleeding through the window blinds. Trevor leaned back an inch. Subtle, instinctive, like the air had grown heavier. And in that moment, he knew. This wasn't a routine meeting anymore. "Do you have kids?" Jackson asked, voice calm, neutral. 2 even. Trevor blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly, then nodded, once, uncertain. Jackson didn't react. "Then maybe," he said, after a pause so long it rebalanced the room, "you'll understand what it's like." Another beat. To be humiliated in public and watch as no one says a word. Trevor's lips pressed tight. His gaze dropped again, this time toward the badge. But Jackson wasn't pressing. He wasn't there to win. He was there to name the truth. And the silence in the office, already thick, became unbearable. "It's not about spilled coffee or lateness or who laughed too loud," Jackson continued, stepping forward. His voice was quieter now, steadier. "It's about the kind of space you've created, a space where fear does the talking for you." The clock on the wall ticked once, then again, each sound louder than it had any right to be. Trevor didn't respond. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he knew no defense would change what had already been seen. He opened his mouth, breath drawn. Jackson raised a hand, calm, unwavering. "Don't." His voice didn't shake. "I'm not here to hear excuses. I'm here to speak." From his coat, he retrieved a folded sheet, worn, creased, but clean. He placed it on the desk with the care of someone laying down a final card. A photo, the broken ceiling camera above Register 2, long unfixed. An internal report with Na's name, unanswered and circled in red. A shift log with Chloe's name erased and reassigned. A file stamped in red. Jada, transferred, dated, documented, silent. Trevor stared at the page, jaw rigid. "Nothing here is loud," Jackson said, tapping once on the paper. "That's the problem." His tone wasn't angry. It was worse. It was resolved. "You've built a place where silence protects the powerful. I don't intend to let that continue." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "This cafe used to feel warm," he added. "Not nostalgia, just a statement, like a weather report from a season that no longer came. Now it doesn't." He pushed the sheet until it touched Trevor's wrist. "The person responsible," Jackson said, "is you." Trevor didn't deny it, didn't defend. His shoulders fell, not from guilt, but from knowing there was nothing left to hide behind. Jackson had removed the curtain, and the silence was no longer shelter. Outside, a milk steamer hissed once, then fell quiet. Inside, stillness reigned. Jackson didn't need to say more. The moment was complete. A reckoning that required no performance, no shouting, no dramatics. Just truth. 20 minutes later, Trevor exited the office. He carried nothing, said nothing, made no announcement, just walked, straight to the back exit. The keys in his pocket stayed silent. No one followed. No one needed to. Chloe saw the motion from across the sink. She paused, eyes narrowing as the door closed behind him. Her hands didn't move. Na turned and scrubbed the milk steamer harder than necessary. Luis, near the fridge, stood still, fists clenched behind his apron, his eyes glassy. At table 4, Jackson sat, unmoving. The shift didn't stop. Orders came and went, cups filled, foam rose, but something fundamental had shifted, and in that empty space where control once lived, a new kind of silence emerged. One that didn't command fear, only attention. The next morning, a new sign appeared in the front window, closed at 11 p.m. daily for team reset. No logo, no fancy font, just truth. Inside, the cafe was quieter than usual, not strained, just adjusting, like a room learning to exhale for the first time in years. Jackson sat at table 4. No coffee, no napkin, just a blank sheet of paper and a black pen beside it. He hadn't written yet. He wasn't here to act. He was here to begin, but only when they were ready. Around him, the team moved differently, not slower, softer. Luis mopped with more care, not fear. Na reloaded syrups without glancing over her shoulder. Chloe sat beside the new hire at the prep counter, teaching the steps with sleeves rolled and voice steady. And Jackson, the man once defined by silence and order, remained still, both hands on the table, No tapping this time, just listening. Because now at last, there was something worth hearing. The girl looked nervous, barely 19, fingers trembling as she hovered between the milk jugs and the timer. Her eyes flicked between machines like she was translating a language she hadn't quite learned yet. Chloe slid a clean cup forward, calm, centered. "Macchiato's not hard," she said, low voice, steady tone. The girl looked up, waiting for a formula. "You only have to remember 3 things," Chloe continued. "Don't overfill the milk, keep the foam clean on top, and most important," she paused, eyes soft but firm, "make it honest." The girl blinked. "Honest? Don't rush it," Chloe said, beginning to pour. "Don't fake the steps, people can taste that." No lecture followed, just movement. Intentional, careful. The drink came together in silence, not perfection, but presence. "No tricks," Chloe added. "Just real hands, real rhythm." The girl nodded, slower this time. Her fingers stilled for the first time all shift. Across the room, Jackson saw the cup land steady on the tray. He didn't smile, but he stayed. As the clock inched toward 2, the lights dimmed slightly. Na emerged from the back, balancing a tray of wax-wrapped sandwiches, the folds tight, careful. "Made too many," she said, smiling in a way that made it sound like a shared secret more than an excuse. Chloe reached for one, surprised. Luis grabbed 2 without hesitation. Marcus bit into his first, leaned back, still chewing. "Feels weird," he said, "like the place isn't strung tight anymore." They laughed. Not loud, but enough to echo softly through the room, like air had finally returned to the building. At table 4, Jackson sat with his legs crossed gently at the ankle, hands resting on the chair arms. And then, so small, so fleeting, he smiled. Not from pride, not even from happiness, but from recognition. It was the kind of smile that forms when something broken begins, quietly, to hold its shape again. Not declared, just known. Luis moved table to table, wiping surfaces with the same care someone might give stained glass. When he reached table 4, he found a napkin, folded, barely touched. It felt heavier than paper should. Inside, one neat line in clean, steady script. "You've walked through what others avoid." No signature, no flourish. Just ink and intent. Luis stood still, both hands holding the message like it could slip away. His eyes searched the room. Jackson was gone. The chair was pushed in. The seat, cold. Luis didn't need a name. He folded the napkin slower this time and slipped it into his apron pocket. Not to show, not to prove, just to keep, because some words weren't meant to be spoken. They were meant to be carried. Around noon, the door opened with a soft creak. An older man rolled in, guiding his wheelchair over the mat with quiet control. He paused, scanning the space like he wasn't sure if he belonged. For a beat, the cafe stilled. Marcus noticed first. He slid a table aside, wordlessly clearing the way. Chloe filled a glass with water and set it gently on the counter before the man even had to ask. Then Elena stepped forward. No apron, no hesitation, just presence. "Take any spot you like," she said, smiling fully. "This seat's yours." The man blinked. Relief and disbelief passed across his face like light. He nodded and wheeled forward, choosing the table near the window. No policy had changed. No new rule had been posted. But in that moment, the cafe remembered something. What it meant to be open. Not just to orders, but to people. He settled in, fingers resting lightly on the arms of his chair. "Last time I came here," he said, voice soft, "they asked me to leave. Said I was blocking the aisle." Elena didn't flinch. She didn't apologize for someone else. She leaned forward. "Well," she said with gentle strength, "if anyone tries to do that again." She smiled wider. "They'll be the ones asked to leave." The man didn't thank her. He didn't have to. Some things are understood without repeating. Near the window, Jackson stood, one hand resting lightly on the glass. Outside, life moved, a dog tied to a meter, traffic hums, strangers passing. But Jackson wasn't watching movement. He was watching reflection. Behind him, Elena scribbled something on a piece of paper, folded it once, then joined him. She pressed the note to the glass with the side of her palm. The message faced outward. Macchiato, bold, staff, kind, no price, no logo. Just handwriting and belief. Jackson read it, and almost smiled. Not because he'd written it, but because someone else finally had. The message wasn't his anymore. It was theirs. Outside, a familiar face paused. Coat zipped high, newspaper under one arm. He read the note. Then he nodded once and pulled open the door. The chime rang, soft, like memory. Behind the counter, Chloe looked up. Their eyes met. She smiled, warm and wide. Not trained, not required, real. "Good to see you," she said. "Macchiato?" The man smiled back. Of course. There was no script. Just two people, meeting without the weight of what came before. Jackson didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. This was no longer his moment. It was theirs. He returned to table 4. Someone had left a macchiato there. Still warm, still steaming. He didn't ask who made it. He didn't need to. He wrapped his hands around the cup and paused, eyes softening at the way the foam held. Imperfect, a little uneven, but honest. And for the first time in weeks, that was enough. No one asked if he was okay, because he was. Later, Clara entered, clipboard in one hand. She stopped beside Jackson. "Northside sent a report," she said. "Someone's considering quitting, said they don't think their voice matters." She didn't name names. She didn't have to. Jackson looked up. "Go," then added, "If there's an Elena there, listen to her first." Clara didn't ask why. She nodded, already turning, already dialing. This cafe had been one fire, but there were others. And now someone knew how to see the smoke before it spread. Jackson leaned back. His name badge caught the afternoon sun. Jackson Rivera, founder. He held it for a moment, then tucked it into his shirt pocket. His fingers pressed over the fabric once, like sealing something that no longer needed to be worn. "To no one in particular," he said. "Quiet. Almost like breathing. The coffee is real. People have to be too." Behind him, Elena heard. She didn't speak, just nodded. Once, steady. The handwritten sign still hung in the window. Closed 11 p.m. daily for team reset. Slightly tilted, tape faded. But people paused. Not for long, just long enough to read, to wonder, and maybe to believe. Because some places don't shout their purpose, they live it. And if you've ever worked where your voice didn't matter, leave a dot in the comments. We'll see you. If you believe kindness belongs at work, that respect isn't extra. It's the start. Follow us. We're not just telling stories about coffee. We're building places where no one has to whisper to feel safe, where every real moment matters. And if you've ever wondered whether anyone else feels the same, they do. You're not alone. You never were. Stay with us. We're just getting started.